So this is Mastery Mondays number 11. Welcome guys, especially the new folks coming in. Love seeing new people here, especially those who are interested in learning more about poker. So, why is that not clicking? Okay, there we go. So last time we covered like the basic types of flops. So obviously there's a bunch of different combinations of flops, but we kind of distill it down into 5 main types just to simplify, and then you guys can just generally understand like what kind of heuristics are available to each flop type, what bet sizing you want to use, how often you should be betting. And this is how you really should be thinking, because a lot of recreational players, like they just play their hand. They just think, okay, I have top pair, or I have a flush, or I have a set, so I should bet, or I've got nothing, so I should bluff, as opposed to thinking about their entire range of hands and whether a certain kind of flop is good for their range or not. So that's really going to be like the focus of today, is really getting you guys to think more intentionally about your flop strategy. I guess before we go into this, have any of you guys like studied like flop strategy? Have like looked into, okay, so Eddie, you've done a bit of studying. It sounds like most folks are going to be relatively new to this. What kind of flop studying have you done, Eddie?
Kind of like lower boards and then dry boards as well.
Okay, cool.
And like depending on position, like what you do in those type of situations.
Right, like out of position, in position, what you do. Cool. Yeah, so like some of this will probably be a bit familiar to you, but that's good to know for context. So the last time I did cover like the general flop types and I went on a high level like bet size heuristics, we're gonna kind of like dive deeper into them today. But like basically what's gonna be coming up is really diving deep into the 5 different flop types, talking about what are the key concepts you guys should be aware of on those flop types. And we're mainly gonna be looking at it from the perspective of the in position player. So the most common like formation in poker is, you know, somebody raises from either early position like under the gun or late position like the button, and then you'll get called by like the big blind, and then you're going heads up to a flop. Obviously low stakes cash, you guys are going to be playing a lot more like multi-way flops, but in tournaments, generally speaking, you're going to be more like heads up when it goes post flop. And even in cash, like that's a similarly like a common mistake as well in low stakes cash, is people do too much calling and limping as opposed to raising 3-betting, because you really kind of want to isolate and just be playing like heads up against another player, especially in position. And that was something I covered at like one of my earlier sessions, which is basically the most powerful formation in poker is when you're heads up and in position against another player, because you just have so many advantages with the positional advantage, the range advantage, and we'll talk a bit more about range advantage. But so range advantage, we'll talk about nut advantage, what the difference is between these two things, and just general bet sizing. So last time we first talked about like kind of like the connectedness or like the qualities of flops. So there's kind of like 2 distinct dynamics, which is like dry or like static flops. So these are kind of like disconnected boards, like ace 8-2 or something like that, right? So there's no straight possibilities. Maybe it's a rainbow flop, so there's no flush possibilities. So yeah, basically regardless of what hand, like there's very few cards that will come on the turn that are going to shift the equity advantage to another player. So if somebody has the best hand on the flop on a disconnected or dry board, they're most likely to have the best hand on the turn as well. Whereas if you have like a wet dynamic flop, these are like 5, 6, 7, 2 diamonds, where like I could have aces and maybe I have the best hand right now, but you know the other player could have a straight draw, flush draw, all these different things. So a lot of different cards can come on the turn, like another flush completing card or any straight completing card that change and dramatically shift the equity advantage. So that's kind of like one distinction to think about, is like, okay, is this board dry/static or is it wet/dynamic? And generally speaking, on dry/static boards, we want to bet smaller. We'll tend to, as the in position player, we'll tend to bet more often and we'll choose a smaller sizing. Whereas wet dynamic flops, because the equity advantage could shift a lot and our opponents will generally have a decent amount of equity, we want to bet larger to disincentivize them from realizing their equity for like a good price. So so I covered that so one is like not only the flop kind of like dynamics, so whether it's wet or dry, but also just looking at, depending on how often we're betting, also influences our bet sizing. So when we're checking often, when we do choose to bet, we should be choosing a larger size. And when we're betting often, then we should be choosing a smaller size. So that's just like a general heuristic to kind of be aware of. Yeah, so example, when the strategy for your range is mostly betting or just entirely range betting, use a smaller size. And then we like to have a big size of wet flop, so that was kind of exactly what I said. Yes, question, go ahead.
What is the instance when you're choosing to now use a smaller size betting?
So one on dry/static flops, and generally when you're supposed to be betting a lot, and we're gonna cover what specific flops you're supposed to be betting a lot. So don't worry, we'll go into specific examples. But that's when you're gonna generally choose the smaller size.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does this change based on your stack size? How much of it is related to stack size, say 30 bigs versus say 120 bigs?
Yes, so this heuristic will be generally true regardless of stack size. The only thing is when you are deeper, you have to be a bit more careful, especially with this what's referred to as nut advantage, because when you're deeper, the opponents will have also more incentive to try to, you can lose a lot of money if they can chase it and realize their equity because they have a lot more to win. Whereas when you're shallower, they have less incentive. So because of that, that means they're probably going to be calling a bit more on the flop, which means if you're going to be betting, maybe being a little bit more selective of when you're betting, knowing that might be calling more, maybe check raising more, because there's so much more to play for. And if they hit their nuts, then they can win a lot more money. So that's one of the main concepts of deep stack poker that shifts. But generally, these heuristics and concepts apply regardless of stack size. Cool, good questions. So I did cover this last time, which is but I'm instead of going to this detail, I'm actually gonna, so these are kind of the 5 types of flops. I'm actually gonna go into each of these one by one, and then what you guys will have kind of this cheat sheet basically, which kind of gives you a general concept. But basically these are the 5 types, which is dry high card flops, so ace 7 deuce rainbow, and we kind of already mentioned on dry static flops, we want to be betting 100% of a range. That means if we're the in-position player, we raise pre-flop. Doesn't matter what, if we raise with any hand that we're supposed to be raising with, then we should be betting 100% of the time once we get check 2 on the flop. And then we should always be using the small size. And then wet, low connected boards, we should actually be mostly checking, just because the opponent's gonna really hit this a lot of the time. And when we do bet, we want to use a large size to disincentivize and reduce their realizing their equity for cheap. High card paired boards like queen, queen, 5, king, king, 5, etc. We generally want to be betting 100% of a range because we're going to have a lot more of the trips. What's up, man?
Hey.
You can see. And then again, because we're betting a lot, we're using small size, low card paired. Conversely, and this is something I screwed up early on, is I just thought any paired board, the opponent's going to miss a ton. So I should be betting a lot on any paired board. But actually, you're supposed to be mostly checking on lower paired boards because the opponent's supposed to have a lot more trips, right? If they're calling out of the big blind, they're going to call with 5-6 off, 5-4 off. Whereas when we're raising, we're not raising those kind of hands. We might only have ace 5 suited, maybe king 5 suited, depending on what position you're in. Pocket 5s for the rare quads. So we're going to have a lot fewer trips and a lot more lower nut advantage, or they'll have the nut advantage compared to us. And then monotone flops. This one's a bit trickier. You are still supposed to mostly bet on monotone flops, but the opponent generally is going to have more flush combos than we do. And similarly, because they're going to be calling with almost any suited combo out of the big blind, even Jack deuce suited, Jack 5 suited, which we're not going to be raising those hands generally speaking. So that's high level heuristics. Yes.
Does the betting on monotone flops depend on whether it's ace high monotone or not?
Yes. It slightly shifts, and we'll cover that. But yes, high card monotone versus low card monotone does impact how often we're going to be betting. Yes. So let's cover kind of these 2 main concepts, which is one is range advantage, which basically if we think about kind of the entire range of hands that we would be raising with pre-flop, and compare that against the entire range of hands that the opponent would have called with, who has this higher equity, or who will have generally better hands on a specific flop. So this is really important because it's really important to know when you have the range advantage or you're at a range disadvantage, because generally speaking, when you have the range advantage, you can apply pressure, you can like check raise, you can be aggressive, and your opponent can't just be like blindly aggressive back at you. If they're a thinking and studied player, because they're gonna know like, okay, like sure, he's gonna bluff me a ton, but also he's also just gonna have the nuts a ton. And there are spots in poker where like, and I've fallen into this trap as well, where like I like, even when you know somebody's bluffing or like is likely bluffing, like I would just have like an ego in poker where it's like, oh, I just don't want to get bluffed by this guy. Like I just like know he's bluffing a ton and I just want to like, fight back at this guy. But there are spots in poker where you're just supposed to be bluffed. Like for example, on those spots where they're supposed to bet 100% of their range on a flop like ace 7 deuce, like whatever, I have like queen 5 suited or something like that. Like sure, he could be betting his like 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited. He's betting his entire range and he's just going to bluff me a ton. But like he's supposed to bet because he's also going to have a lot of ace-x. So it's not worth me fighting for that pot. Like you're just supposed to fold. And that's a huge part of like just understanding range advantage and not just trying to like, you don't have to fight for every single pot. And that was like a big mistake I made early on early on in my journey is like, I would like be like, oh no, this guy, I know he's supposed to bet 100% of the time. So I know he's like also just doesn't have it a ton. And I would just like try to raise with hands that I'm not supposed to be raising with. Yeah, so generally like when the opponent has a range disadvantage, they're going to be playing more defensively, more calling, less check raising, etc. So conversely, nut advantage, and these are different where you could have a range advantage but actually have the nut disadvantage. So nut advantage just means one player has more of like the very strong hands, like sets, 2 pairs, straights, flushes in their range compared to their opponent. So this is important because, I mean, similarly, if you have either of these advantages, you get to be aggressive, and it becomes a little more unique when one player has a range advantage but the other player has a nut advantage, and we'll cover some of those examples. But similarly, when you have the nut advantage, again, you get to be more aggressive, you get to check raise, you get to like donk bet, you get to lead, things like that. And just understanding that and knowing that concept when you have that nut advantage is good to know, so you can apply pressure. And then conversely, when you know the other, even if you have the range advantage but you know the opponent has the nut advantage, it means generally you can't just like fire 100% of the time, because you're just going to face aggression a lot of the time as well. Any questions about range advantage, nut advantage? No?
Obviously, like it comes with time. Like when you're sitting at the table, like you know, you have to experience somebody's range, right? You're just like learning by seeing their whole cards and things like that, right? This is
Yes.
You acquire that through over time.
Yes. So you're talking about more exploitative adjustments. So when we're talking here, we're talking about like from a game theory perspective. If somebody is playing game theory optimal, then one player should, if they're playing the ranges pre-flop that they should be, then one player should have the range advantage in this situation, one should have the nut advantage in this situation. But of course, poker there's a human aspect of poker, and if you see like this guy's supposed to only be raising with 20% of hands pre-flop, but he's raising 100%, then yes, that shifts the advantages, and now like you have to adjust your strategy. But fundamentally, what's the most important in poker in your study is like develop a core understanding of what is game theory optimal poker, and then develop exploits on top of that. Because if you don't understand game theory optimal poker and what people should be calling or raising with, then you're not actually exploiting, because you're not deviating from any theoretical baseline. You just have like a exploitative baseline and you're deviating from an exploitative strategy, and it's just, you'll kind of like, it'll take you in a lot of different directions. But yes, that's a good point. Any other questions? Range advantage, nut advantage? Okay, cool. So let's go to flop type number 1, which is dry high card. So generally pretty hard for our opponents who are the out of position player to connect with these boards. They're going to whiff on a lot of these. We're going to be pretty strong. So I think I kind of gave this away already, but like if we're the in position player, who has the nut advantage or who has the range advantage? We'll start there.
The pre-flop raiser, the one in position has the
Pre-flop raiser. And who would have the nut advantage?
also the same.
Yes. So in this case, the pre-flop raiser has both the nut advantage and the range advantage. So we as a pre-flop raiser have both. And because of that, we just get to put like max pressure. Like we're gonna get check raise, like basically the out of position player theoretically has 0 check raises on this board. it like doesn't make sense at all for them to check raise. So when I bet this board, what's up guys? We're talking about flop types right now, and range advantage, nut advantage, but if you guys have questions, just chime in, we'll catch you guys up. But basically on a dry high card board, like the out of position player theoretically has 0 check raises. So when a player check raises me on this board when I bet, then I immediately know like this person's like not studied. They're playing like some weird range here, and I would be very suspect of like, okay, this is probably very heavily leaning towards like a bluff or like, and sorry, I shouldn't say they have 0 check raises. There are still some check raises. Obviously, if they have their best hands, like if they flop a set of deuces, they have a flop a set of sevens, they're still gonna probably want to check raise and this is actually a good board because they're gonna get a lot of value from like my ace king, my ace queen. So they don't have 0 check raises, but they have very, very few check raises. Yeah, so our general strategy on this is bet 100% of a range and just bet small size. Like, I'm not too particular on sizing, especially for like, I think most of us who are all like recreational players is like, as long as you're picking something between like 25 to 33%, like the one adjustment you can make in like sort of a 25 to 33% of the pot, the adjustment that you could probably make and you probably see other people make in like low stakes cash games is probably like upping this to as much as like 50%, because low stakes cash game players just tend to overcall. Anyways, so you can, especially when you have good hands, like you can up it a bit more, try to extract more value. Any questions on this one? No? Okay, so second type of flop is like wet, low card connected flop. So very connected, lots of like straight, flush draws, 2 pairs, a lot of big draws possible. Who do you guys think has the range advantage? Or who do you think has, let's start with nut advantage. Who do you think has the nut advantage? So nut advantage for the new guys who just joined is like basically who has more of like the best possible hands, like sets, straights, which would basically be sets, straights, and 2 pairs on this board.
Could be flush too, no?
You can't have a flush yet. You can have flush draw, but you no flushes yet.
The out of position player.
Yes. And why do you think the out of position player has the nut
They're
advantage?
playing that range a lot more than we are if we're raising pre-flop with any ace X.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to have, well, first they're going to have 6s, 5s, and 4s, which we could have as a pre-flop raiser, but they're going to have 6-4, 6-5. They're going to have hands that are like still flop like good equity, like 6-7. They're going to have probably all the offsuit combos of 6-7 as well, which we don't really have any of these offsuit combos. And it's worth considering that like offsuit combos, there's like 16 combos of them pre-flop in your range, whereas suited combos, there's only 4. So it's actually very important if an opponent is also playing offsuit combos because it quadruples the amount of combinations of that kind of hand class they can have. So they can have like 6-7 offsuit, they can have like 5-4 offsuit, 6-5 offsuit. So they just have a lot of pairs of a lot of combinations of very strong hands. So yes, they have the clear like nut advantage. Which player do you guys think has the range advantage? Same? Okay. And why do you think the same?
Well, I guess like with regards to this particular flop, they have a more opportunity to hit, like to move through it.
Yeah, I mean, for very similar reasons why they have the nut advantage is like they've got, you might think that, okay, they've got draws, they've got like 2 pairs, they've got sets. This is one of those unique flops where actually the in-position player has the range advantage, but it's very close. It's almost like negligible / practically even. But so we have, as the in-position player, we have the slight range advantage, meaning of all the possible hands we can have, we generally have more equity. Our range has more equity compared to the opposition player, and that's largely because we have all the aces, kings, queens, jacks. They're very vulnerable on this flop, but right now on this flop, like we'll have all of those, whereas the opponent doesn't. They don't have all the overpairs, so we're still going to be beating their 6-7, but their 6-7 has a ton of draws. We're still going to be beating like their 4-3 suited that would call. So we'll generally have the range advantage, but they're going to very, very clearly have the nut advantage. So because of this,
where's out of position sitting?
So generally in all of these is out of position is just going to be the big blind.
Okay.
Yeah. So like as the big blind player, that's the most common spot that we're going to be playing out of position. And then we're just going to be assuming on all of these that it's a button raising range against big blind calling range.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're not sitting in front of you. They're out of position compared to you, but
Yes.
they're not like after the big should have a way tighter range, right?
Yes, exactly. Because this is pre-flop raise and then call. So they wouldn't be after the big blind because then it would have been like a raise and then we called.
Right.
Or perhaps we 3-bet. So it's a different scenario. But yeah, this is what's more common is like folds around to the button raises, big blind calls. Very, very common formation, especially in tournament poker. Yeah, so that's the assumption that we have here. So yeah, the main concept here is the out of position person just smashes this board. So we just have to be very careful as the in position player, and we're just supposed to be mostly checking. The out of position player is actually supposed to have some leads on this flop as well. We'll probably cover that in a future class because there's a lot of like knowing what boards to lead on, what sizing, and then what to do on future streets. Okay, if I decide to lead with a hand like 4-3 suited on this, like what do I do on like a king turn or something like that? So we'll talk about like leading and donking strategy, but yeah, generally the out of position player, because the in position player is supposed to be doing a lot of checking, like when you flop a set or you flop a straight, you're going to want to lead some to try to extract value, but then you're also going to want to mix in some bluffs with their like pair plus straight draw, pair plus flush draw, or just maybe like naked straight draws, things like that. So we're checking a lot. We're basically checking like most of our range. Obviously, we're still going to want to bet with like our best hands, like if we flop like a set ourselves. And when we do choose to bet, we're going to choose the larger sizing as opposed to the smaller sizing because we're betting so infrequently. Cool. Any other questions on this one? All right. So high card paired boards. So like queen, queen 5, king, king 5, ace, ace 5. So yeah, very hard for our opponents to really hit anything. I mean, we're going to whiff a decent amount on this as well, like ace jack, ace 10, king jack. But a lot of those are going to either wrap around the high card and we'll have backdoor straight draws, or we'll just like smash with like trips a lot more than the opponent. But who do you guys think has the range advantage?
Well, the pre-flop laser
Yes, pre-flop razor and nut advantage.
also.
Yeah, so this one's a line that's pretty clear. We have a huge range advantage and nut advantage. And that's largely driven by the fact that we just have way more trips than the opponent. Yeah, because we're going to be playing like a lot of our queen X, especially off of the button. So again, because we have such a large advantage, we're betting 100% of the time, and we're betting small size. So that one's pretty clear. Okay, what do you guys think about this one? So low paired boards. Who has the range advantage? Who has the nut advantage?
I think the aggressor has the range advantage and the big blind has the nut advantage.
Let's see. So, yes, you were right. Yeah, so this is actually similar concept to like low connected boards, but basically we have like a very, very slight equity advantage. Again, driven mostly by the fact that we have like more of like the over pairs, which are going to be doing pretty well on this board. But we just have a lot less trips. They're going to have all the offsuit combos of 5s. We don't have all the offsuit combos of 5s. So they're going to have a lot more trips. So they're going to have more of the nut advantage on this board. So again, we proceed cautiously, similar to kind of like the low connected boards, which I think I mentioned these guys before you guys came. Is like a big mistake I made like early on. Is like I just bet range on any paired board, which is actually a pretty big blunder because like you're not supposed to be betting. I was just like, oh, they're gonna just miss all the time. But you're supposed to proceed very cautiously on these boards because you're supposed to be check raised a ton on these kind of boards. And even if like they don't need trips to check raise you either, they just know if it's like a studied player, they're just gonna know that they have like the nut advantage here, and they're gonna get to like check raise you with like 8-4 of spades. So like a gutter with like backdoor flush draw is a pretty common combination that or like 6-4 of spades, 6-7 of spades or something like that. They're gonna get to just like check raise you a ton on these kind of boards. Yeah.
So I have a question actually.
Yeah.
What if it's like 5-5 queen? Do you check or bet?
5-5 queen has similar properties where again they'll have a lot more 5s. Obviously the queen, the high card queen, gives you like pushes your equity advantage a bit, but generally you're gonna want to proceed cautiously. Whereas like we said, mostly check here. So like let's say you were checking something like 80% of the time, maybe you're checking like a little less, like 70% of the time. Like you're gonna probably want to bet with like most of your queens, but also like checking back some of your queens is like works pretty well in your favor as well, and you can like be really tricky. So yeah, but generally speaking, you're still gonna be be checking most of your range. Yeah. Okay. High card monotone boards, so like king 9-6, all spades. So very polarized board. Generally speaking, like you're gonna have like either super strong hands, like you already have a made flush, or sort of like strong but vulnerable hands, like you have ace king, no spade. Like it's great, you hit top, but like still like any spade comes and like you're basically dead, or you'll basically have like almost nothing. So who do you guys think has range advantage and nut advantage? We'll start with range advantage. And someone besides on God, because yeah, I know you answered a bunch already.
We realistically should have range advantage here.
Okay. In position player, I think. Okay. What about nut advantage?
Pretty much almost even. I would assume. Like, both players could be playing the exact same flush, but still should be us because we'd be playing higher card flushes in comparison to the opposition.
Yeah, so we should have more of the higher card flushes, like ace queen suited, like some of those kind of hands that they're generally gonna be having less. So you are right that we do have the range advantage. So we have the range advantage, but the opponent has the nut advantage, and this is driven by the fact that they're gonna have a lot more suited combos than we do. They're supposed to be calling like big blind open against button defend. They're supposed to be defending with every single suited combo, literally every single suited combo. 6 deuce suited, 7 deuce suited, 8 deuce suited, like all of these like garbage suited combos. They're supposed to be defending. So they have way more like suited combos than we do. We're not raising with those hands, generally speaking. So so they're gonna have a lot more suited combos. That's what primarily drives the nut advantage. So what we generally do on this is like we're still going to be mostly betting, but it's like, so I give this range here, it's like 50 to 70%, and this will range depending on like, okay, is it a high card monotone or is it a low card monotone? Generally low card monotone is even worse for us, so we're going to be betting less. High card monotone is slightly better, so we're going to be betting close to 70%, and just generally because we're mostly betting, we're still kind of choosing the small size. But just proceeding cautiously, knowing that they have the nut advantage on these kind of flops. Cool. Does that make sense? Okay, nice. So now that we've gone through the 5 types of flops, now I have a quiz for you guys. So I will give you like 1 to 2 minutes. I want everybody to think about this, which is like, so again, range bet means you bet. So we're button, we raise pre-flop, we got called by the big blind. Look through each of these flops and think about which one of these do we want to range bet. And range bet means we bet 100% of our entire range on this flop.
Is it multiple choice or just one answer?
There could be more than one answer. It could just be one. So yeah, think through each flop. Think about what type of flop class it falls into, and what are the properties that make us either want to range bet or not range bet. I'll give folks like maybe another minute to just think through this. Okay. You guys feel like you have your answers? All right. We'll go through one by one, but first, who thinks that you should be range betting on this first flop, flop A? We'll just get hands first and then we'll go through answers after. Okay, so most people think you should be range betting on flop A. Okay, B, who thinks you should be range betting on 9-7-3 rainbow? Okay, like 1.5. All right, and then C on 8-3-2 monotone. Okay, also like 1.5. And then D on Queen 7 deuce rainbow. Okay, 2.5, 3, 4.5. Okay, 6 maybe. Okay, cool. So I think you guys generally got this right, which is so yeah, for A, very clear range bet. This is like massive. Actually, we didn't talk about this specific kind of flop. We talked more about like disconnected flops, but like if you see like three Broadway cards, especially ace high, we are gonna be wanting to range bet because we're gonna have ace king, ace queen. We're gonna have jack 10 suited. We're gonna have a lot stronger hands on this board. Yes.
On that board, would
Yeah.
it still would it be a smaller bet size?
Yes. Whenever we're range betting, we're always using a small size.
Okay.
And I'll actually caveat, I won't say like any three broadways we want to range bet because queen jack 10 is kind of like tricky, for example, and pretty unique. It'll actually quite heavily favor the out of position players. So we're actually going to be doing a lot more checking. But if you see like an ace high 3 Broadway board, generally speaking, like that's very strong for us, and we're going to want to range bet. On the 973 rainbow, this is not a range bet. So I think most people, I think it was only like maybe 1.5. This is not a range bet, generally speaking, because like they're going to have more 9x in their range. Again, because they're going to have all the offsuit combos of like 9-8 offsuit, 9-7 offsuit, 10-9 offsuit. Whereas generally speaking, we only raise with the suited combinations of those hands. So they're just going to have more like top pair combos. So we're going to be betting less. It's definitely not a range bet. When we do bet, especially with our strong hands, and this is kind of like a very specific scenario I've studied quite a bit with my coach, which is like when we have a hand like ace 9 suited, king 9 suited on 9-7-3, we really like to go for the large size on this. We'd like to go like even like 80%, 90% pot on a board like this, because for the exact fact that the opponent's going to have so much 9x that we just outkick them a ton of time, and they can't fold. They're never going to fold to our large sizing on the flop, so we just get to extract a ton of value. So we just go like big on flop, turn, and river, and you'll just like you can just like extract a ton of value on like very specifically boards like this, like 9-7-3, any like 9-7-3, like 8-6 deuce, and you have ace 8 suited, or like 10 like 5 deuce, like these kind of middling high card boards where we flop like top pair, top kicker, and they're supposed to have a lot of like offsuit combinations of top pair. We just get to bet like really big with both our good hands, obviously like top pair, top kicker, but then also with some bluffs, like, and our bluffs would be like 10-8, backdoor straight, backdoor flush draws. I'll cover a separate session on bluffing, which is like what are the combinations you want to choose for bluffing, because I think a lot of people also just like kind of pull like random combos to bluff and are not thinking very intentionally about like what combinations of hands you want to bluff with. We'll cover that in a separate session, but yeah, so this is not a range bet, and generally when you do bet, you're going to want to choose the larger sizing. 8-3 deuce monotone, does anyone want to take a stab at why this one is not a range bet? So I think most of you got this right.
Because the net advantage is clearly with the big blind, right?
Yes.
So you're expecting to be check raised, and then you're just going to be put in an awful spot. So
Yeah.
that's why you opt to check your range.
Yes. So we just covered this like monotone boards. They're going to have way more flushes than we are, and it's kind of like a low monotone board, so it's not a range bet. We still do get to bet like a decent amount of time. Like we're doing more betting than checking, but it's not a range bet because the opponent has the net advantage. Okay.
So why do you bet more than check?
Because we still have a decent like equity advantage. They're gonna like they're gonna have more flushes, but they're gonna have a lot of they're gonna have a lot of garbage. Like it's a very polarizing flop where they're gonna have like either really strong hands or they're gonna have just a lot of garbage. So we get to bet more because we're just gonna generate a ton of folds still. I mean, not as many folds as like an ace king queen board, but we'll still generate a decent amount of folds, so we still get to mostly bet. It's just not 100% of the time. Okay, what do you guys think for Queen 7 deuce? I think most of you guys said this is a range bet, but anyone want to take a stab at why?
Nut advantage with the queen exposed. Your big blind, you have range advantage also.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they hit, they're probably hitting the bottom half of it. And if they hit top, then we probably outkick them.
Yeah.
Push them for it.
Yeah, we have range advantage, nut advantage on this board. They're gonna miss this a ton, or they're gonna flop like a middle pair or low pair. Even if they have like queen 10, queen 9, we still have all the ace queens, king queens, so we just like dominate them a bunch. But yeah, so we just get to, again, this is the high card, dry, disconnected flop. So any kind of like board like that is we have a huge advantage as the imposition player, and we just get to bet range.
When do you give up on this?
Sorry?
When do you give up? So you bet.
When you give up.
Yeah, you assuming you got a queen. This guy takes the bet and then raises into you. Turn comes something.
They raise on the flop?
Yeah, so you bet into
Okay.
them.
Yeah.
They don't just call, they re-raise you.
Yeah.
Turn comes because you're calling at that point. Probably if they re-raise, I don't know. Like,
Depends.
Raise back into them.
Depends. I mean, if you've got straight garbage, like you've got 10-9, no back doors, they raise, just fold.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to fight for that one. Or sorry, I guess 10-9. Sorry, you do have back doors with 10-9. I don't know, something else that has like
Barely,
no back doors.
So if you're
yeah.
sitting on top pair, they bet back into you.
Sure. I wouldn't fold. I would not fold top pair to a check raise. No.
Yeah, you just call it. Or
Yeah.
do you shove?
I would not shove because this is not a board that they're going to be check raising light very often. Like if they're check raising, they're representing pocket twos, pocket sevens.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be check raising a ton with like queen 10. So like even if you have ace queen, like what are the hands that you're trying to get to like you're either gonna be crushed by like a set, like, and there's not that many bluffs. I mean theoretically they're supposed to have like some wild bluffs like 5-6 with backdoor. So again, like all these hands that like maybe wrap around some of these cards and have backdoors, but because it's so disconnected and it's a rainbow like flop, there's fewer of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't just call with like anything, and I personally wouldn't like 3-bet on the flop. Yeah, I'm curious, Chen, what would what would you do?
I would just call just because people do check raise some, like you said, wrap around backdoor stuff, so you want to keep them their bluffs in.
Mhm.
Sometimes if the turn comes super wet and they bet big, I'll shove just to put their draws in a really bad spot.
Mhm.
And like sometimes they call it off bad, you know. So
Yeah, so
Like,
as long as they didn't hit, you're good.
yeah, like 8-7-2 doesn't have a lot of like
Queen 7-2.
Queen 7-2 doesn't
Yeah.
have a lot of value combos.
Yeah.
But they could check raise like I like check raising like king jack here because king jack blocks king queen and queen jack. So I would use like some of those hands to check raise bluff, but have to have backdoor like flush draw. I wouldn't do it without backdoor flush draw.
Yeah, that's a pretty classic combo for like check raising here.
I like check raising drag king high with a or queen high with a king in my hand just because it blocks king queen.
Yeah.
And it takes that out of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Do people understand like blockers? Kind of. So basically, the concept that Chen's talking about is like, if we're the out of position player, we have king jack. That like, and the in position player, like one of their value hands that they'll be betting with is king queen. By us having a king in our hand, it reduces the number of combinations that the opponent can have for king queen. Because there's only 4 kings. If we have one of them, now they're down to 3. And there's a queen on the board, so I think what does that leave? That leaves like what 9 combos of king queen if they're also raising with all the offsuit combos, which they should be on the button. So yeah, that's 9 combos versus 12 combos. So it's reducing 25% of the combos that they could have, which is decently significant, and factors into why like if we have a king in our hand, we'll generally want to like that's a really great combination for us to raise with because they'll have a few less like good hands in their range. But yeah, so like if we have back to your question, Michael, which is like they raise us on this flop, we have ace queen, just call. Like I think there's no point like just like re-raising here, and you want to keep their bluff combos in because they should have some. There's not very many value combos, like literally pocket deuces and pocket sevens. Like I guess if they could have queen deuce suited, they could have queen 7 suited. Yeah, maybe even like some 7 deuce suited, but like
I think they should be folding 7 deuce suited versus under the gun probably.
Oh, is this under the gun? Oh yeah, this is under the gun.
But like
I guess it
queen deuce
depends
and
how
queen seven
deep.
I mean, some people are defending anything, so.
Yeah, like depending how deep, I think you're supposed to be defending like almost any suited combo,
Yeah,
even 7 deuce suited.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's still like not too many value combos, and there's not too many bluffs to choose from. But yeah, you want to keep them in. And you can float as well, even with that same kind of hand, like king jack, like ace king, like again like backdoors. You can float with those because you're still ahead of all of their bluffs, and then just proceed cautiously. And then Micah, you're saying like, what do you do? Okay, so let's say you call, and then you're saying what happens if they just like keep like firing.
Pushing. Yeah.
It depends on the turn and it depends on the person. That's
Yeah.
all I can say.
Exactly, yeah. So turns and rivers become trickier. Where like flop strategy is like, okay, you know, this flop I have the advantage. I'm supposed to bet. You know, they check raise me. I'm basically supposed to call 100% of the time with ace queen. Turn now depends like, okay, what bluffs like what bluffs do I think this player is gonna choose, and like, does that card like improve those bluffs? Yeah. Do we get like are there some backdoor flush combinations that now have a flush draw? And if he choose like, so if it is like a flush completing card, or sorry, a backdoor flush completing card, a backdoor flush draw completing card, sorry, then he's gonna have a lot of bluffs that he'll continue with, because those are a lot of hands or bluffs that you would kind of check raise with on the flop. But generally, if it's like a pretty dry card, like let's say it's like the fourth suit, it doesn't really complete anything. It's like I don't know, take like an 8 or something, an 8x, or like another 2. Another 2 is actually pretty good. Like anything like board pairing is pretty good because it reduces the combinations of sets that they could have. It reduces 2 pairs. I probably wouldn't fold. Yeah.
It's weird because you wouldn't fold, but also would they continue bluffing?
Exactly. They're not supposed to be continuing bluffing either a ton. Like they're supposed to shut down a ton on that kind of card.
But isn't that
Yeah.
card good for their range, like a 7 or 2 in that particular aspect?
It's not. It's not because it reduces the amount of value combinations that they have. So we feel more comfortable with a queen in our hand because before there were 3 combinations of pocket deuces. Now when a 2 comes, there's only 1. So it reduces their set combos of deuces by like 66%. It reduces how many 7-2 and queen 2 they can have as well. So yeah, it reduces a ton of the value combos they can have. Like yeah, they're still gonna have a 2. They're still gonna have 7-2 and now have a full house for sure. Yeah, but they'll have fewer combos.
I've seen some good players check raise like the 7 and the deuce when there's a huge gap between the queen and the 7. Sometimes I'm not sure like exactly.
On the turn?
On the flop.
Oh, on the
Like
flop.
they'll check raise bottom pair with a backdoor flush draw, or they'll check raise like even like second pair they'll check raise sometimes. I'm not really sure why, but like usually it's when there's a big gap between the queen and the 7 because a lot of cards change your equity on the turn.
Interesting.
So what would be a theoretical grounding for something like that? So we're just saying, like, in the face of this additional aggression,
Like if we have king 10,
You
he's
should
check raising to
stand down.
jump
Like,
that.
why would they do
If
that?
we have king 10
Yeah.
and
his board,
and he check raises us.
yeah. We're not.
If you have king 10, no backdoors, like I don't know, I fold a ton. Like I just fold. I'm like, sure, fine. He could be choosing. Like he's got so few bluffs to pick from. Like even the ones that Chen's mentioning, like a lot of players don't do that as well. Like some will. Like, and you'll see this pretty commonly on boards where you see it actually like, I would say probably like slightly more connected. Like at the 7 were like a 5 and they had like, anyways, it's slightly more connected and they have like bottom pair and like deuce 3 or something with backdoors. They can pick up like a 4 to have now improve also to like some straight draws as well. You'll see a lot of like check raising with those kind of hands. Plus they slightly block the other guy from having sets as well when they have like a 2 in their hand. But yeah, there's like kind of like really few bluff combos to choose from. So
I wouldn't float live against people because they're just not bluffing that often.
yeah.
Like I don't think I saw a single flop check raise bluff at Wood. I saw one, and that player was very very good.
Yeah, that is a general population exploit for low stakes recreational players, is they don't check raise enough, and they're not defending enough as well. So like you're supposed to still like defend with like I don't know, yeah, like Jack 10, like backdoors, like backdoor straight, backdoor flush, but like a lot of recreational players are just like straight up just like fold like those hands on this kind of board and like yeah, so like anyways, so they're not going to be defending enough and they're not check raising enough, so, which is why Chench is talking about exploit, which is like okay, if they're check raising on this, then like just fold all our garbage. Like what are you gonna do with like King 10 offsuit and then something random comes and then like you face another big bet, you're probably just gonna fold. So just find a better spot.